Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Steve Wyss and I'm joined by my good colleague, Jonathan Fadugba. How are you doing, John?
I'm very well, Steve. And hello to everyone else listening to this podcast. Welcome. We're about to have a break in Sweden, so this could be the last time we talk about Allsvenskan for a good month or so, potentially, at least, I think. But all things considered, I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's it. It's gone for, a good 6 to 7 weeks, I think, maybe even longer. 3rd of July is the next scheduled Allsvenskan match, Norrköping against Malmo. Obviously, the break for the Euros here. But yeah, this does seem like a very significant break. With most teams have played 8 games, a couple of sides have played 9 times each. So we're a good chunk into the season. And firstly, are you disappointed about this break? I mean, you knew it was coming, but it kind of ruins a bit of momentum it had going.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm disappointed. It could be a good time to sort of pause things. I'm really enjoying the season, as I've said, but you always get to this sort of stage of the season where things start to take a little bit of priority, even in your own life, really. In general, sometimes things can get in the way. I mean, obviously, European season is just coming to a close, so there's huge games everywhere, isn't there? Really, and of course we've got the Euro starting in June, so it's an interesting time to have a break. One thing I found quite curious is the as you said, the season restarts in July, but it doesn't. It's still going to be in the middle of the tournament, so you've got sort of a strange prospect where there might be certain players who, if they do get to the latter stages of this competition, there's not too many players that I suppose you might expect to be there, but you never know. Teams that get to the latter stages are going to maybe potentially not be back in time. So we'll see how that plays out. It's only the quarterfinals and semis, so of course, any teams involved, Sweden would have to do very well to get that far, and there aren't that many Swedes in the national team anyway who are playing in Allsvenskan still. So I suppose to a certain extent it's understandable scheduling, but there's still other players in other squads potentially who might not be available. Someone like Hamzik is a good example. But all things considered, it's probably the right time for a break. And so I guess it's goodbye for Sweden after this episode.
Yeah, I'll just give you a top 4 for those who are interested. Malmo are top on 20 points. Djurgården 17 points. AIK are 3rd on 14. Elfsborg on 13 points. And Kalmar are 5th on 13 points. As you said, Elfsborg and Malmo have played a game more. At the bottom of the table, Häcken, they are still propping up the standings, but they have now had a victory on the board, 3-1 win against Varberg. They are on 6 points, 7 points for Örebro and 7 points for Varberg as well. Östersund on 8. So, that's the crucial positions in the table. And I did just mention Örebro there down in second bottom. Basically that has had consequences at the club, hasn't it?
It has indeed. We've got another managerial casualty. It's been already announced that Häcken's manager will be leaving to Denmark in the. He's off now after the cup final, and now we've had a new announcement that former two-time pod guest, Axel Kjær of Bodø is resigned as coach, and he will become the sort of the head of football at the club. I think that's going to be his title. So they'll hire a new manager, and Kjær will, he will just be, I think, in charge of things like recruitment and the overall responsibility over the whole club. I think the academy, women's team, things like that. It's been an interesting situation for the last year or so. If anyone has listened to our podcast, if you go back a year or so in the archives, if you're new, you want to listen to it, we had Axel Kjær twice on the pod, and last season, before the beginning of last season, he came on and he talked about the fact that he'd taken on a lot more responsibilities at the club. He was in charge of not only managing the team but also recruitment and all kinds of areas, negotiating with agents, everything. So bringing in players. He did kind of hint at times that that's a real big challenge and a really big job, and I think it's kind of probably got to him. I think it's maybe ground him down a little bit. The results of the team have been poor this season. They've been one of the worst teams in the league, really. 2 wins out of 8. 5 goals scored, the lowest in the league. So 16 goals conceded. Probably if things continued in this way, they might be relegation candidates, and that's not a good place for Örebro, who traditionally usually around mid-table. So they've called it a day. They'll get a new coach in who can focus solely on managing the club, which is what they need, and Kjell can go back to kind of maybe a more general role. They've said at the moment where the club statement from the chairman, so we're currently working on hiring a head coach. As Axel enters a new role as a manager, he will handle issues around the A-team, recruitment, scouting, player sales. He will also be broadly responsible for several long-term development issues within the club. He will also be responsible for our newly started women's team and OSC's academy. So he's still got a lot of work to be done at the club, but I think from his point of view, probably a chance to step back, not be too involved in the day-to-day coaching side of it, and they can bring in a coach who can maybe, get them up the table.
He certainly likes to have his finger in a few pies, doesn't he? Does Axel Kjell? But they would have won 2 of the last 4 games. I think it sounds to me like maybe he's just run out of fumes a bit, and a coaching change will be maybe a good thing for the club. Just briefly, do you think there's enough, within the squad to comfortably keep them above relegation?
Well, I don't know how he manages it, to be honest, because it's hard enough being a manager of a football club, let alone having to. I mean, it's kind of an old school thing, isn't it? A bit like maybe in the old Premier League days, in the early Premier League years of Ferguson, Wenger type thing, where you're in charge of every aspect of the club. Even having to negotiate with, like I said, negotiate with agents and things like that, player sales. It can't be healthy for a football club really to have one person responsible for so much. They also lost their assistant manager. I think he joined Malmo. He mentioned it in that podcast. So he didn't even really maybe have the right backing behind him to a certain extent. You could argue. So I know they're quite an attractive club. They get a lot of interest in their coaches and stuff like that. So they've lost 1 or 2 members of staff as well. So that probably hasn't helped him. I think at this point in time, I think they're in for a bit of a relegation battle. I've always thought they overachieved a little bit. They've had a few seasons where, they've done okay. Kjell's done quite well with them. In general, they finished 7th last season. I believe they finished 7th the season before as well. No, 8th, sorry. So he's kept them solidly mid-table with not a great budget, not a great squad really for Allsvenskan level compared to some of the other teams they finished above. But I think the squad's got weaker and weaker as time's gone by. I predicted them to have sort of I think it was a lower mid-table finish. So I think I predicted them in 10th, which is probably where I think they may just about end up. But a lot will depend on who they appoint. I think the squad has got worse. We got, for example, Oscar Janssen, who was a goalkeeper of the season last season. He went to Norrköping, and I'm not a big fan of their replacement, to be honest, Bobby Allan. I think he struggled a bit, as much as I'd like to praise him. I remember saying in the pre-season show he's played in Liga and things like that. He's been at fault for a few goals. I think he was quite poor. The first goal against Malmo at the weekend, they lost 2-1 at home. I thought he could have done better for Adi Nalic's goal, for example. It was across him. It wasn't too much in the corner, and he didn't do a good job of it, really. So I think recruitment's not been great. So I think they will be in a bit of a battle. But if you look at the table, Steve, obviously they're only 3 points off 9th. So still early days. A lot will depend on who they get to replace them.
Yeah, and just looking to the top of the table now, Malmo are in a familiar position, 3 points clear. It seems like they're just sort of finding their form a bit now. They're scoring goals as well. 7 out of their 9 fixtures have ended over 2.5 this year. I've seen a few of their games. Actually watched a bit of the Örebro match, and they got a good winner there from Soren Reeks, who struck a really nicely struck sort of longer range shot. But they actually seem a decent watch this year, Malmo. I must say, I'm quite pleasantly surprised by them. They're not boring, are they? But they're just starting to kick into gear. Maybe the breaks come at a bad time for them. Do you think?
No, I think it's a fine time. They've had a few problems really. Ola Toivonen has got quite a bad injury. I think he's going to be out for several months, which is a real shame. Also, Christiansen's had a few injury problems, but they've got quite a strong squad actually. Malmo, I think they've got a bit of depth there that they maybe haven't had in previous years. Players like Nalic, Pavle Vagic can come in as well. So they've got a few players who can sort of step up now. As you said, they started to look good. 18 goals. That's by far the most in the league at this moment in time. They've played the game more, obviously, but they are leaking goals a little bit, and if we take the Elfsborg game, I think we talked about it before, but they do tend to concede one or two. The Örebro game even, Dennis Hummert scored a decent goal, low finish, and you kind of question the defending of that goal. And even when you look at it, really, there's a few players who might leave now in the summer. So yeah, you could argue from that point of view it's not a good time because they want to keep their players, and I think they've got one or two that will potentially be attractive to other clubs. Very strongly rumoured that Armand Hodzic will be off to Atalanta. So I think he may well have played his last game for Malmo. Their centre-back who's been fantastic for quite a few years now. Good young defender, good ball-playing defender, strong player, really, he deserves his move to Italy. I think he's going to be one to watch in the future. So yeah, it's I suppose from that point of view, they're going to have a bit of work to do in this window. They've got, like I say, Champions League qualifiers coming. They'll need to maybe fill that gap in defence. But they're just a strong side in the sense that they're very good from set pieces. I mentioned it on the last podcast. They that long throws are incredible. It's a real weapon for them, and they're just managing to get that balance right now. Really, only one defeat in 9, and generally looking good.
Yeah, I've noticed quite a few teams actually in the Nordic region are using the long throw is really making a comeback. At the moment, and teams can't deal with the long throw. I don't know what it is. Maybe they've just forgotten how to defend against it at the top level, but. In terms of Allsvenskan, then, who I'm going to exclude Häcken from this because they're an obvious answer. Who has surprised you in both a good way and a bad way this year?
You mean teams?
Teams, yeah.
Surprised me in a good way. I would say Kalmar, 100%. Kalmar have been really, really good. I thought they would do well this season. I thought the new management there, Rydström, I thought he would get a tune out of them. But I didn't. I don't think anyone expected them to be 5th at this stage. That they deserve their place as well. They don't score many goals, but they don't concede many either. They're starting to actually have good possession, which is quite rare for Kalmar in recent years. Starting to dominate teams. They upset Hammarby, beat them in this last round just gone. Beat them 2-1, and I thought they were decent value for that win. To be honest, Hammarby have been on the flip side. Hammarby have. I just think they disappoint in general. There's a little bit of pressure coming now on Stefan Billborn as a manager, and I think it's probably about time there was some pressure on him. 13 goals conceded again in 8 games. They just leak goals for fun. They score a lot, but they're too leaky for my liking. They're just not a solid enough team. There's so much investment in Hammarby. So much recruitment goes into that club. They spend a lot of money on good players. They've got the likes of Akin Kumbi and Mu, who might leave now. They've bought Astrid Selmani up front. You just expect a bit more from them, really. Expect them to do better with the amount of money they spend. But it always seems to be sort of mid-table-ish, and they shouldn't be losing to teams like Kalmar. With all due respect to Kalmar, that Hammarby, I think they should be doing a lot better than they've done in recent seasons. So that's probably a good game to really have that answer that question. I think Degerfors have looked good in spells. I think they've brought a breath of fresh air to the league. I think they've been quite an exciting team to watch. We've talked about their 3-4-3 style, and they've got some decent players. I think their keeper, Ishmael Diawara, has been fantastic this season. It's probably about it, really. I think everyone else has been okay. EFK Göteborg, 1 game, 1 win in 8, so I think they've been a bit, maybe you could argue, slightly disappointing, but 6 draws, only 1 defeat. So the league's still sort of just about taking shape. I think we still need a few more rounds to really start drawing more wider conclusions, but I think the other team as well I would just name that has impressed me a bit that maybe I didn't quite expect is AIK, being in 3rd place. I tipped them to be a lot lower than that. I think they've got quite a good balance. They got goalkeeper problems big time. I think that's going to be something they're going to need to address in the window. Janosevic is really struggling. He's been criticised quite heavily. He had a shocking game against Mjällby in the 2-2 draw. He made a howler. He's made quite a few howlers this season, actually. He made 1 against Ostersunds. So a lot of pressure on his position. Bunimir Janosevic is a 31-year-old goalkeeper. A lot of question marks about him at AIK, and they've taken out a loan to be able to maybe buy 1 or 2 players. So you wonder if they'll go into the market for a keeper. But all in all, I'd say impressed with AIK, mildly impressed with Degerfors, very impressed with Kalmar, and Hammarby need to do better.
Yes, and obviously, Häcken down there. We've talked about them a lot in recent episodes, so thought we'd not need to go on about them again. But they have picked up a victory, like I said, 3-1 against Varberg. Maybe they can kick on from that in the second half of the season. And sort of just to round things off here, I mean, you seem pretty happy with how the league's been going so far, Jonathan. I mean, final sort of thoughts on this first 8 rounds and what to look forward to when the league comes back in July.
Yes, on Häcken, I would say they look good against Varberg. Anyone who supports Arsenal and remembers the early Wenger years, 2 of their goals were really kind of Wenger-esque goals. I thought really nice sort of pass and moving triangles. Benny Traore in the score sheet for the first goal, and Tobias Heinz, both their new signings, finally getting some points on the board for not only Häcken but also my fantasy team. I've stuck with them through all these rounds, and they're finally rewarding me. They looked really potent. Some really nice attacking play for both those goals, and Heinz with a lovely chip finish. Anyone who remembers those Arsenal teams, it was similar to that kind of football until. You have to go quite far back now. The latter parts of Wenger's career. The latter 10 years weren't so good, but in the early years, when they used to play some really nice football. But the league's going fine. We've got a transfer window coming. We'll see what happens there. And, all things considered, Steve, I think, for example, Djurgården are looking good. I think we could have a title race in that sense. I think they could maybe challenge Malmo. They're looking very strong in terms of goals scored and goals conceded. Good ratio, +7 goal difference, best in the league. So I think we're going to have a really entertaining relegation battle. I think there's about 6 teams that I would say might battle it out. I think that, Östersund's got a fantastic win, for example, 3-0 against Sirius this past weekend, and they were really, really good. Again, Sirius were poor. The league's shaping up nicely. I've said it before. I think there's a lot of tactical fluidity in these teams. So there's some exciting players. Let's see if they can be kept during this window, this transfer window, because I'm a bit worried that we might lose quite a few players. We've lost Sead Haksabanovic, of course, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there could be 1 or 2 more that go as well. So, but all in all, I think it's been an exciting season. There's not much you can predict at this moment in time. I think it's quite well matched. We were asked a question about that, weren't we, at one point, and I mentioned that I think it's a really even kind of competition this season so far in Allsvenskan. So, no, things are going well. I'm enjoying it, and I guess I'll have to watch some Erik Botheim and try and brush up on my knowledge for the next few weeks while we go our break.
Well, that's having a 2-week break after Sunday's Eliteserien, so not much really to get your teeth stuck into for a bit anyway, Jonathan. But you mentioned there Haksabanovic leaving. You know what it feels like around this time of year, or the equivalent anyway, that we're always sort of getting a bit depressed about players leaving, the leagues up in Norway and Sweden. And Haksabanovic, I feel like he's left Sweden about twice already. Come back, and now he's going again. What's the going on?
He's off. Yeah, it's like the hokey cokey, isn't it? He's in, he's out. He's all shake it all about, really. You put your Sead Haksabanovic in and turn around, and that's what it's all about. So he's gone. It was fun while it lasted. You could argue one of the best players in the league, and as you said there, Steve, it's kind of like whenever a team sort of has a player that does well, you don't get much out of them, do you? I mean, he's played 8-9 games this season, so yeah, he's off. Basically, it's broken now. It's the biggest ever sale in Norrköping's history. So this is a big transfer, actually. He's officially departed for Rubin Kazan in Russia. They couldn't turn down the money, basically. I think they've said their acting sporting director, because they had a lot of club changes, as we've spoken about in the summer, in the winter. But they said, we're happy to be able to present the largest deal in Norrköping's history of all time. We thank Haksabanovic for his time in Norrköping. We wish him all the best. He's delivered in Allsvenskan, shown great loyalty, and we would like to thank him for a fine collaboration. So they said they're proud and satisfied, and why wouldn't they be for the money? It's rumoured to be, I can't remember exactly how much it's rumoured to be. I think it's about £6 million is the rumour, which is a lot. for Allsvenskan. If that's accurate, it'd be one of the biggest deals in Allsvenskan history, in fact. So that says a lot. And in terms of the financials of it, obviously Haksabanovic was at Norrköping. He joined from West Ham. And previously was at Halmstad. He came through their youth team, was sold to West Ham, came back. So yeah, he's obviously he's gone, and West Ham I think will get a percentage as well, because I think there was a sell on in it. So any West Ham fans or anyone who likes West Ham, they're going to be due around £1 million of that move. I think 1.5 maybe roughly. So yeah,
not that they need it.
No, not that they need. Well, mate, in the COVID times, any money's good money at this moment in time. But yeah, they're in the Europa League, aren't they? So obviously they'll be happy. But no, I think I think it was always going to happen. Haksabanovic is, to be honest, he's too good for Allsvenskan. He always came back just to kind of find his feet. It was a bad move to West Ham in 2019. Shouldn't really have. I think he moved too early. I think he was too young at that time to really move. Still very young, and he came back to kind of find his feet, get game time, and show what he can do. He with Norrköping, he's played 65 games, I think, and he's got 13 goals, 23 assists. So, you can see he's producing decent numbers, good crosser of the ball in that 3-4-3 system of Norling's. And Norling said it's been a real pleasure to have worked with him. So, yeah, another one bites the dust, Steve, and we'll see if there'll be any more. But all in all, as I say, I think Haksabanovic has been a great player to watch in this league. And I don't suppose he'll be back anytime soon now. I think this should be it for him now. He can sort of find his feet and continue with his career.
I can picture Karen Brady now licking her lips at the delicious 1 million sell-on clause that West Ham have got there. I
was worried about where you were going with that one.
I knew you. I thought you would. I thought I'd tease you for a little bit there, but
we're entering dangerous territory there. But no, Haksabanovic is 22, and so as I say, he's still got a long career ahead of him, and I think, like I say, the move from my point of view, it was just too early, the move, and he's now sort of found his feet a bit more, probably a bit more mature. There was a lot of rumours when he was at West Ham that he was sort of out partying with Marko Arnautovic and a few other influences in that dressing room, Andy Carroll and so. So I think maybe he enjoyed the bright lights of London a bit too much, if reports are to be believed. So it didn't quite work out from there. And when you're sort of 19, 20, it's very hard to go from Allsvenskan to the Premier League. You're not going to get in the first team straight away unless you're incredible. And 23's football, I would argue, is better. You would have been better off just staying in Allsvenskan. Why go and play 23's football when you're already playing in a good quality league? So it's always money dictates it, doesn't it, Steve?
Do you know what? I thought you were going to go down a route then for a minute when he was all rumours were he was going to be. I thought he was going to be going down Paul Pescasoligo territory there, but
absolutely no comment.
Oh man, right. So I've got one more thing on the itinerary here. And this surprised me when I came across it. Fans are back, apparently, in Allsvenskan. Tell us a bit more about this, Jonathan.
Yeah, well, before we wrap up, we might sort of talk about 3 or 4 players who might go as well in the transfer window. And we got one question as well, I think, don't we, Steve?
Yes, there is.
And you want to read that out now?
The question is from FPL Napoleon. Thank you very much for the question here. Has BK Häcken turned a corner with their win over Varberg? Should we expect to see more of the same from them now?
Yes, thanks a lot for your question. So I'll answer your first one on fans, because there's some exciting news. Steve, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear it. There's been an announcement, I think it was this evening, in fact, that Swedish elite football, so it's kind of breaking news, they're going to allow arenas to open to the public again. A maximum of 500 spectators from June 1st. So this will mainly apply to Superettan for now, obviously, because we're on a break. So I think the first game that's going to happen is GIF Sundsvall. But yeah, the days of sort of 8 fans is now over after over a year, and we'll be able to welcome crowds back to games in Allsvenskan, even if it is quite a small number of fans. There's been a lot of controversy in Sweden about this because there's been as I've said, there's only been 8 fans allowed in games this season, and clubs have been opening up their terraces, or they open up their box, their directors' boxes and things like that, so you can have the hospitality. So usually there's about maybe 100 fans in there. They'll get the boxes, and a select group of fans will be in those boxes. So it's been 8 in the stadium in the terraces, but obviously then probably 100 extra so in the directors' areas. But what's been controversial about it, Steve, is that for example, in Sweden, in supermarkets, you can have hundreds and if not thousands of people shopping in IKEA or places like that. So there was a famous game not too long ago, a few weeks ago. AIK fans went to the local supermarket, and about 250 of their fans turned up at the supermarket. One of those sort of multi-story supermarkets, and just started waving their banners and flags over the various sort of different floors of the supermarket, and cheering and lighting up flares and things like that in the supermarket. Just to sort of point out that it was almost a sort of a protest, basically, at the absurdity of allowing 8 fans in an open air arena and not allowing, whilst you allow hundreds and hundreds of of people to go shopping. So it has been a bit of a bone of contention in Sweden. People haven't been happy about it, but the announcement now from the government is that 500 fans, socially distanced, can be allowed. We will. Yeah, there's been 480 games played without an audience, which is a shame. We've really missed the fans. Super Etten will be the first round of games that will happen, and I guess they'll see how it goes. And if they've announced as well, if it does work out and the crowds are good, then they will start to allow 3,000 spectators from July the 1st. So there's the potential that we could be back to some kind of normality by the time the Allsvenskan season resumes. So yeah, good news, Steve, coming out of Sweden.
Superb news, I must say. That is absolutely excellent news. And you did mention there was a couple of other transfers you want to quickly talk about before the end of the Swedish section.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of FPL Napoleon's question, I think we can expect Häcken to. I think we can expect more of them, actually. I think sometimes you get it with teams where they just need to get that, they just need to get that monkey off the back, don't they? And then they can sort of move forward. And I think that's Häcken they've often played all right football, but just been a very frustrated side, and when things have gone against them, they've been a bit upset. They've got a cup final coming. So, who knows? That could be also a big thing for them. And it will be their manager's, Andreas Almsby, his last game in charge. So they probably want to give him a good send-off. They've got decent quality of fixtures coming up, though, after the break. They've got AIK at home, Kalmar away, Norrköping away, Elfsborg at home, Djurgården away. So that is 5 really tricky fixtures, to be honest. And it will be a real test of their credentials. And of course, I don't think we know who the new manager is, unless I've missed something. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know who the new manager is. So that's still to be resolved. There was a report I read last that said they've had a lot of world-class names. That was what their sporting director said. So I don't know if it's Alan Kirbishley or someone like that. Or
Jolly could be in the mixer.
Maybe Roy Hodgson fancies coming back to Sweden. You never know. But Häcken is quite an attractive job now, I think. So I'm not sure if it'll be world-class names. I don't think we'll see Antonio Conte, but certainly I'm sure there'll be a good quality caliber of applicants. So yeah, I think we can expect to see them do better. I think that Häcken AIK game could go either way, that one. So they've got really, like I say, really tough 5 fixtures, but they're going to need to pick up points, because if they're on the wrong end of those 5 games, then they are really going to be in big trouble halfway through the season. So big few weeks coming up for Häcken, and we'll see how it goes. But I do think they'll start to slightly improve, hopefully.
It might be a case where the bigger games it's better for them because there's less pressure on them, and they might get more chances in it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did all right. I mean, they didn't exactly play badly against some of the bigger teams that I saw anyway. They should have more points on the board. So, yeah, Häcken are a team to definitely follow, I think, after the resumption of the league. And, it is quite a few weeks until it does resume. I'm sure there'll be quite a few changes at clubs before then. I said the transfer window is it already open, you say, John, there, or it's about to open. And, it's always some teams just like brand new side in the second half of the campaign. It's the way it goes in Sweden. I'm kind of used to it by now.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget, of course, we've got the European Championships. We're not going to talk about that on this episode, but we may sort of touch on Sweden. Their chances at the Euros maybe in the next episode. But in terms of transfer, Steve, I just wanted to sort of touch on one or two because I'm fairly sure that Arne Hodzic will leave. As I said, I know Arne Hodzic from Malmo. I think he'll be the biggest transfer. Could arguably be one of the biggest ever, depending on the fee. There's also a lot of rumours about Amar Sher at Hammarby. Reports that Lecce in Italy and Groningen have made offers for him. He's a young 18-year-old who hasn't, he's only played 3 games this season. He only started 3 games this season, but he's sort of quite highly rated. But yeah, as you've just said there's always rumours about Swedish players. It's quite a well-scouted league these days. It's quite there's a lot of attention on it. So anyone who does well, I mean, Akinkunmi Amu, where will he end up? Have we seen the last of him? Who knows? So there's always a few players that will leave in this coming window, and we'll keep you up to date with it, of course. I think Witry is one as well, Djurgården, who is on a high level now, and there's a lot of talks about potentially can Djurgården keep him. I think they probably expect some bids coming in for him. So as always, a lot of the top players will leave, but as always in Sweden. New players will come up, so we'll see how it goes. I think obviously Joseph Akumu is another one at Elfsborg. I think there'll be a lot of rumours about him in this coming window. The big centre back who we've talked about, there's rumours that Reims in France have a strong interest in him. A bid of around £2 million has been reported roughly. Ghent as well, always in for a Swedish player, aren't they, Steve? So we'll see about that. He's got a contract till 2022, so yeah. Watch this space, and of course, in the coming weeks, we'll keep you updated on the Nordic Football Podcast as always. We won't have much football to talk about, but we'll definitely have some transfer news, I'm sure, as we go along.
So until July the 3rd, then, Jonathan, we bid the Allsvenskan farewell. We look forward to it returning, and it's been good stuff so far. So yeah, that will be the end of this section. Thank you very much for your coverage on the Allsvenskan for the season so far, and like you said, there'll be more of that to come very soon. Okay, we'll take a break. After it, we'll be moving on to Eliteserien and Norwegian matters. So stick around, and we'll see you very soon.
Welcome back to this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We're going to head to Norway now with my colleague Steve Wyss. Now, Steve, you're usually pretty good at fantasy football, but I took a look at the table and I saw you in 52nd place on our Allsvenskan, on our Eliteserien Nordic Football Podcast Fantasy League. So I know you're the expert, but do you have any comments on your fantasy performance before we get onto it? Just putting you on the spot here.
Well, it was even worse, Jonathan. I was outside of the top 16,000 before round number, the Thursday round. Thankfully, I've had a bit of a renaissance, you could say, a resurgence, sorry. Hopefully we can trend in the right direction now. But honestly, it was pretty damn pathetic before then. Had a very poor start to the year.
Yeah, you have indeed. I mean, I'm not one to comment because I'm literally doing a West Bromwich Albion, I think, at the moment. So I don't want to comment too much about where I am in this league. But in case you are part of the fantasy league, we've got a good number of us in the league this year, but we want to improve it. So if you are playing and you haven't joined our league yet and you're listening to this, then go to fantasy.eliteserien.no and get your team in. Join our fantasy league. Its code is EV70I0. That's the code to join. If you've already entered the team, you can still join the league and you'll be put into the league, so you won't lose out on any points or anything like that. But it's so far, Steve, you got a bit of work to do to catch up on the leaders, which are they've made some good starts. I'll just read out the leaderboard here. In third place, we've got Emil Magnus Jacobsen with Juveland United. He's on 324 points. In second place, we've got a regular in our 2 leagues, OCD All-Stars, JS with 328 points. And top of the league at this moment in time is It'd Be Rude Not To, managed by Average at FPL. So Looks like a specific FPL account there. So he's running away with it so far with 337 points. So a lot of work for you to do there, Steve, to catch them up. But yeah, well done to those guys. And if you haven't entered yet, do get your team in. Now let's move on to the action and talk about what's been happening on the pitch, because we've now sort of had about 5-6 rounds, haven't we, Steve? I mean, it's very varied. Some teams have played 3 games, but Bodø, Glimt and Rosenborg 5 games and 6 games respectively. And we've got them respectively at the top of the table. Glimt top with 4 wins, 1 draw, no defeats. And Rosenborg 6 games, 3 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat on 11 points. For two rounds this week, Steve. So just want to initially get your thoughts on these last 2 rounds.
Manic, really. There's been a lot of fixtures adding up. You might look at the league table and you think, wow, this is just confusing because some teams are on 6 games, some on 3, some have got 4. If actually no one's got 4, but some have got 5. It is a bit of a mess. And I think until we're through these sort of rounds, I think it's like midway through the summer when we should get a much more clearer picture. But yeah, obviously Brann at the bottom with 6 losses out of 6 is a big talking point. Bodø, Glimt. There's only 2 sides that are still unbeaten: Bodø, Glimt, and Starbæk. Although Starbæk have only played 3 matches, so yeah, there's a few surprises. There always is going to be at this stage, but death, taxes, and Bodø, Glimt winning football matches. Not much changes in Norway.
Do you think psychologically that having played so many fewer games, do you think that affects players or managers or clubs from your point of view? Because it's quite rare that you see such a discrepancy in games. I know it is very early days, but you look at the table. I mean, I see Brann 6 games, 6 defeats, 0 points, and then above them is Haugesund, who played 3 games. We got 3 games in hand on them. I mean, you might have the jitters. They might be already relegated at for some of their fans. Minus 13 goal difference. From your point of view, do you think that has any weighting psychologically on any of the teams, or do you think it's not a big deal?
I don't actually know. And this is where I need to sort of ask managers and players, I think, because I'm thinking like the sports teams I've been involved in, I would rather have points on the board. That's just me. I'd like to front run if I can. I don't like the idea of being down there, even if I've got games in hand. But that's just my personal preference. Haugesund and Sarpsborg and Odd down there might be loving life. Who knows? They might be thinking, oh, we've got 3 games in hand here. We're fine, boys. So, yeah, Brann are obviously not going to be enjoying themselves because there's 6 losses out of 6. But I really don't know. I think it would depend. I mean, I would always be someone who likes to have the points on the board and try and front run. But it could be anything.
Yeah, and there's been a few sort of special days in Norway, hasn't there? Sort of famous celebration days, things like that, national days, which led to there being sort of special rounds of football. So I'm just going to read you some of the results from last week. Since our last podcast, we've had 2 rounds. Monday, the 24th of May was 1 round, and then this evening's gone. Thursday, 27th of May. So I'm just going to read you all the scores so that anyone who's not seen the results has some sort of overview. We had Odd 1, Sarpsborg 1 on Monday, 24th of May. We had Brann 1, Bodø Glimt 2, Haugesund 0, Starbæk 0, Kristiansand 1, Strømsgodset 0. Kristiansand, by the way, are strongly becoming my favourite team in Norway for reasons that I think we've said before, but I'll talk about maybe later. But Lillestrøm 1, Viking 3, Mjøndalen 1, Vålerenga 1, Tromsø 1, Sandefjord 3, and Rosenborg in the big game, Rosenborg 2, Molde 3. I think, Steve, you had a prediction on that game, which we can talk about in a minute. And then Thursday just gone, so this evening just gone in these games. Bodø Glimt 2, Haugesund 0, Lillestrøm 1, Odd 0, Sandefjord 1, Rosenborg 2, Sarpsborg 0, Kristiansand 1, go on the Kristiansand, Starbæk 2, Brann 0. 6 out of 6 defeats now for Brann, incredible. Strømsgodset 1, Tromsø 1, Viking 2, Mjøndalen 1, and then in a big sort of game, a bit of an upset potentially, Molde 2, Vålerenga 3. Steve, let's start with that big game, because you predicted Vålerenga are going to have a good season. And I also think, I just want to ask you about your Y-Scout blog as well, which is our latest blog of the month on Y-Scout, of our partners at Y-Scout. If you want to go and check there for all the latest data and video, we're partners with them this season, and we do a regular blog about both leagues. and you've done a blog on Vålerenga, haven't you? Does this result surprise you? What you've seen this evening, Molde 2, Vålerenga 3?
Massively surprised me. I can't actually comment on these games yet because I was otherwise engaged on Thursday evening, so I didn't actually have a chance to watch any of these games live. But I expected Molde to win comfortably because they're the better side. They have a great home record. But Vålerenga have actually gone there and it looks like they've nicked it statistically. I think they've had 4 shots and 3 on target. That doesn't tell the full story of the game, so I don't know. I can't really fully comment, but it's a massive boost for them. I was beginning to think I've actually cursed them a bit by doing the Wisecout blog. Ever since that blog came out, they've been shit. So I was a bit fearing for them. That's a massive result, though. You can't underestimate if you go away from home against any of the big clubs in whatever league you're in the world, you are going to get a confidence boost from that. And it might just be the pick me up, and to kickstart the season that they need. And the quality's there. As I said in the Wisecout blog, I think they've actually got on paper a side that can win the league. It's about things all coming together, a little bit of luck here and there. The manager needs to make sure he's on the ball all the time, not just sometimes. He brings a lot of good qualities to Vålerenga, but he needs to maybe he himself needs to adapt a little bit in certain games as well. But yeah, on paper, if they kept this squad for the whole season, they could win the league. But already they have dropped too many points, and I think if they had lost that one, you could have definitely kissed goodbye to any gold medal hopes. I still think it's a bit bleak. You can't be dropping points to Christiansen and Mjøndalen already. But that's given them a fighting chance. They've got to go on a good run now, though.
Yeah, and for anyone who wants to read that blog, our latest for Wisecout, it's now on their new blog, which is hosted on Huddle. So go to huddle.com/blog, and you should be able to find it there pretty easily. It's called Vålerenga Tactics. So the full title is on the website, but yeah, it's a look at their tactics, look at their new players. It's called Bringing This Giant of Norwegian Football Back to the Top. We're partners in association with Just Football. So if you go on there, you can have a good read, performance analysis. Really good work, Steve, as always, with their tactics and their style. But yeah, let's move on. We've got quite a few questions, as always, from our listeners on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. So I'm going to sort of pick your brains on one or two of these as well. Thanks to everyone who's asked questions. As always, we really appreciate it. Steve, I'm going to start with one from, who should I pick? I'm going to pick Lab Locks, at lab_locks. And they ask, will anyone compete with Bodø or Molde? Rosenborg could be a team on a mission. Looking forward to tuning in. Thanks very much for listening, Lab. Hope you are enjoying the shows. And Steve, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously that ties into the discussion we've just had about Vålerenga, of course. Do you see anyone else competing? And what's the situation there with Rosenborg?
Yeah, I mean, it's 1 from 4 teams. Bodø, Glimt, Rosenborg, Molde, Vålerenga. They're the 4 teams who could win the league. I'll be honest, Rosenborg has surprised me, actually. They've been a lot better than I thought they would be. They've got a massive hunger and a desire to do well. I think what's happened is you've got a squad now there's not so many in that squad that have actually won gold medals before. And I think we had a situation where maybe they got a little bit stale with guys that had won the league a lot, and you maybe got bored of winning and you lose your edge a little bit. But there's a clear hunger. It's driven by certain players. Christopher Zakariasen is the main instigator. He's actually becoming maybe one of the best. Well, no, maybe about it. He is one of the best players in the Eliteserien now. His journey to the top has been superb. He's in the Norwegian national team squad for the next round of matches, and he's absolutely spearheading their campaign. And they're scoring a lot of late goals. They're clearly believing in themselves. They beat Sandefjord 2-1 in the 92nd minute on Thursday evening. I don't think they'd have won that match over the last couple of years. Whoever was being in charge, they didn't have that mentality to keep going right to the final whistle. Whether they can actually keep it going throughout the whole season is interesting, because I still think that Bodø and Molde probably have more quality on paper at times, even Vålerenga as well. So, yeah, fair play to Rosenborg. I think they have been a lot better than I thought. They've only been outplayed once, and that was against Bodø Glimt. But even then, they managed to nick a draw. So is it good or bad that you're relying on late goals all the time, though? Because it can't happen regularly, can it? You can't expect it to continue happening all the time. It's a good and a bad thing, in my opinion. I still don't think they'll win the league, but yeah, they've been better than I thought, Rosenborg.
It's good to hear. And of course, they beat Sandefjord 2-1. Goals from Hovland and Molins. Molins, who used to be in Sweden, of course. So good to see him doing well there. Zacharias with an assist and Tag Seth with an assist. So yeah, they look like they're sort of progressing quite well. And thanks a lot again, as I say, to your question, Lab Locks. Let's move on, Steve. I'm going to. We can't go through this episode without talking about Brann. I mean, shocking, really. 6 points out of 6. You said on the last podcast they are the Liverpool of Norway, potentially, with their fan base and that kind of history. They lost 2-0 at Stabæk this evening, just gone. Amankwa and Skitter with the goals. What on earth is going on at Brann, Stephen? And before you answer that, I've got a question from Chris Hilliam at Footy Anali Chris. Good little analogy there. Good little play on words. He says, which manager or head coach is capable of turning it around at Brann, assuming Kari's days are rapidly diminishing? Steve, firstly, just lay out what is going on at Brann. I mean, what on earth is happening there? And then if you could answer Chris's question as well in terms of managers, what's the managerial situation?
They played 6 out of 6 games. Only Rosenborg have played that amount. So the fixtures have been adding up for Brann. I mean, let's cut them a little bit of slack for that. Quite what they've got left in the tank, I have no idea. They've got to pull themselves together, try and get a result against Strom's Godset this weekend, and try and get some points before this 2-week international break. But I look at their first 5 games, and they were brutal fixtures. I mean, they faced Viking Molde, Rosenborg, Bodø, Glimt, Vålerenga. That's bloody hard. And then they had the away match at Stabæk. I'll be honest, you might have seen me tweeting this morning. I was very tempted to actually back them. I was very tempted to bet on Brann away at Stabæk because they looked a big price, and I actually pulled out. I didn't have the bollocks to take them, to be honest, because there's an old saying that bad things happen to bad teams, and they missed a penalty in the 14th minute. Robert Taylor. I mean, if that penalty goes in, it's a different ball game, isn't it? And then they end up losing 2-0 against Stabæk. So, yeah, 6 out of 6 defeats, but. You know, really, probably Stabæk's the only easy fixture, if you class Stabæk as easy, that they've had. And we'll talk about the manager in a minute, but sorry times for Brann, a lot of panic going around, but I don't think it's as bad as it seems. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to just read 1 or 2 comments from their fans on the Twitter feed this evening. Sorry, but this is not good enough. The coach and the club and the management and the players, none of them are good enough. One comment, some of them I can't even read because they're a bit rude. Unbelievable that you managed to make my betting predictions look so bad. Unbelievable that you managed to make my prediction of 4 teams look so optimistic. Here's one comment. This is a scandal at SK Brann. There is so much incompetence living within the walls of Brann Stadium that I become speechless. I mean, I could go on. This is, some angry fans here, isn't there? There's one that says if there is a loss against Godset, then big changes must take place. This is not good enough. Steve, do you think there'll be big changes taking place? And if you could answer sort of Chris's question there in terms of the managerial situation, who could come in and turn this ship, because it is looking like a ship that is sinking. And just in terms of the next 3 fixtures, you did mention, they have had some tough games, haven't they? The next 3 games, Godset, Sarpsborg away, and then Odd at home. So, what are your thoughts?
Winnable matches for sure. As for who can come in, it's a good question, actually. I think I can't really give any names, but I would say anyone who comes in with a clear tactical identity. They haven't got one under Kara and Ingebrigtsen. You just don't know what sort of football they're trying to play. It's neither here nor there. Even teams that are struggling like Sarpsborg, they're playing this defensive 3-4-3 system. You know what they're about. At least with Brann, I haven't got a clue. I generally have not got a Scooby-Doo. And that's the problem with Korda. I think they showed something against Rosenborg and Bodø Glimt. They should have beaten Rosenborg, and they conceded late goals. They gave a good account of themselves against Bodø Glimt. I think he's not a bad manager, really. I think he's not a bad motivator. I don't think he's got the squad necessarily he wants there at Brann, and I don't think maybe tactically it's quite working for him right now. I can't dismiss a manager who has won elite Australian titles and saying he's tactically useless or anything. That can't be the case. I just don't think tactically it's quite working for him at Brann for whatever reason. Whether they need a change or not, maybe they need a change just to go in a different direction. Sometimes that's what football needs, a football club needs. And I think that if they did bring someone else in, they need someone that's like very obvious what sort of style they're playing, whether it's like a big Sam Allardyce defensive sort of thing, shit housing teams, or sort of, like a Graham Potter, nice looking football, passing stuff like that. They need a clear identity. That's Brann's problem.
Thanks very much for your question then, Chris Hilliam. If you're not following us on Twitter, what have you been waiting for all your life? Follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. You can follow Steve on Twitter at Meatman Soccer. You can follow myself at JF Football, JFFUTBOL. I tend to tweet mainly on the Nordic Football Podcast account, really, in terms of Swedish stuff. But every now and then I'll drop an opinion. If you've got a question, always welcome to tweet me. We'll move on because we do have probably 3 or 4 more questions. But firstly, before we touch on those, I want to talk to you about the 2 unbeaten teams, because there's only 2 teams now left in the league who are unbeaten, and they are, it might surprise 1 or 2 actually. Bodø Glimt, maybe not so surprising, but Stabæk. Where's that come from, Steve? I mean, I know it's only been 3 games, but have you got high hopes for Stabæk this season? And just tell us about these 2 teams, their progress.
Well, Bodø Glimt have started the year well. You could actually look at their fixtures and say, have they beaten anyone decent yet? And probably the answer is no. The one match they faced against someone good-looking was Rosenborg, and they drew it 2-2. They played very well, though. It doesn't surprise me they are unbeaten after those fixtures. They will have some tougher tests to come, but I think the good thing for Bodø Glimt is their sort of tough fixtures are spaced out more evenly across the season. I think some of the other sides have had to face some of the big teams on block almost. Stabæk, I mean, you said it yourself, the reason they're unbeaten is they've only played 3 games. I've not actually been impressed with them, to be honest. I think the good thing for them is they are unbeaten. Fair play for digging in, but they've not looked that good to me. If they can see that penalty against Brann, it might well be losing a game by now, but they were second best against Odd and Haugesund, who've not been that great. But they started the season late compared to some other teams, still finding their feet. They're hard side to work out, Stabæk. You generally could be any version of them on the day. I think they'll finish around mid-table, some good days, some bad days. And I don't think they're going to stay. Well, they've got Rosenborg this weekend. They're going to lose that. So that I don't think their unbeaten run's going to stay intact for much longer.
Yes, and you've predicted them to finish, I think you've predicted them in 6th in the pre-season podcast. So looks like you've got some high hopes of them, but you're not that impressed with them so far. So an interesting one. And their next few games, they've got some tough games coming up, Rosenborg away, and then Tromsø at home, and then Molde away. So certainly we'll learn more about Stabæk in the next 3 games, I'm sure. We've got a question now on Glimt, and of course they are very popular at the moment in time. Not just in Norway, but in general, really, because they've been so good in the past sort of 1 to 2 years. Got a question from Andrew Kaiser, at AW Kaiser. Thanks very much for your question. He's got 2 questions, but I think we're going to stick to one of them. Kasper Junker scored 27 for Glimt, he says, last year. Botheim is on pace for 30 with a goal every game so far. That would tie the Norwegian record from 1968. Is there any chance he keeps this pace up, Steve?
Well, this is a great question. You know what? I was something on Twitter earlier this week from Ben Wells, who he asked something. Let me just see if I can find it. Here we go. If you played for Glimt 30 games a season, 90 minutes guaranteed every week, how many goals would you back yourself to score over the course of the season? It's one of them. Look, he didn't score a single goal for Stabæk last year in 15 matches. But it's about finding the right fit for a player, isn't it? I mean, we mentioned Molins there at Rosenborg. I mean, he's looked damn bloody useless in the last 2 years. And he's actually getting into some good positions at Rosenborg, and he's bagged a couple of goals. I guess the question is, how good is Botheim? I think he's not a bad player. He's not a bad finisher. But the system that they play, if you're playing striker for them, you are going to get yourself some chances for sure. It's just the way it is, because teams having to focus on other players. If you've got good movement and sort of a poacher's instinct, then you can do well. I mean, in terms of the actual question, how many can he end up scoring? Well, he scored exactly 1 goal, I think, in every game so far. So, I mean, he's going to probably have a match where he goes bonkers and gets a hat-trick or 2. He's going to have some lean spells as well. But, yeah, this team does... I don't think the Glimt train is quite as looking at as strong in terms of firepower at the moment, but they're due a bunch of more goals. My gut feeling is he probably won't score as many as Juncker. That's just my gut feeling. But I think he'll be between 20-25. I'm going to say 24 goals, I'm going to say, if he stays fit. Yeah, if you're a striker, you want to be going to Bodø Glimt, that's for sure.
In your opinion, Steve, who is the best striker in the league?
God, that's a very tough question. I have to need a bit of time to think about that, to be honest with you. It's not one that's going to go straight off the tongue right now.
There you go. There is Meatman Soccer. And thank you for your question, Andrew Kaiser. Yeah, I suppose I am putting you on the spot there a little bit, to be fair. So maybe we can save it for another time. Maybe there's not a clear standout. Or maybe you're listening to this and you think there's a clear standout. So please tweet us at Nordic Footpod. Let us know what you think. But yes, we're coming to the end of this episode now. So we've got 1 or 2 more questions. But yeah, it's looking... it's still early days in Norway, really, isn't it? There's still some big... I think the next 3 rounds, maybe we'll start to see a bit more clarity. There's still a bit more football to be played before we can really draw some conclusions, probably. But I definitely am not going to let this episode go past without a mention for my boys, Christiansen, who are starting to really appeal to me as a team to support. I did think about supporting Odd, but I haven't quite made my decision on them yet. 3 games, 0 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat. Not that will influence me, but not a good start to the season for them. But we got a question from Frode Mikkelbust. Hope I pronounced that correctly. At Fro Mike. Thanks for your question. And his question is, thoughts on KBK? Strong away victory today in 3 in a row with a big smiley face and a thumbs up emoji. And then he says, and that Sarpsborg team, my God, they are really going to struggle to stay in Elite Serie. And Steve, what are your thoughts on KBK?
I'm actually going to start with Sarpsborg here because he's totally right. I think they're not looking very good at all. I think Mick Ostara is kind of a bit like a dementor here. He's draining the soul out of the team. You know, the last sort of year and a half, they're not a good watch. I would not recommend anyone to watch a Sarpsborg game. They're bloody horrible to watch, really. Not very exciting matches. He's got this 3-4-3 system. It's a very defensive version of it. And also at the minute, they are missing probably a couple of attackers that would probably help them, but they just don't create enough chances, apart from open play anyway. They started the season bad last year and they turned it around. They beat teams sort of down there, and maybe that makes me think they can probably survive just by doing it again. But I do worry. I think Stara just needs to look at the system a bit and be a bit more adventurous. I don't know. In terms of Christiansen, well, we shouldn't be surprised, should we? I mean, this match I wasn't surprised at all. I expected them to beat Sarpsborg, to be honest, with the better side. But do you know what? I was actually... they lost their first 2 games, and I was thinking, you know what? This is the year Christiansen fail. This is finally going to happen. But they've turned it around. I don't know how they do it, because I look at this squad and I'm like, it's not that good a squad. You know, there's no real standout star player now that Pellegrino's left. You could maybe say the goalkeeper, Sean McDermott, is a quality goalkeeper, but it's like they have a bunch of the squad, like a bunch of loads of decent players that add up to a really good sum, but they don't have like stars. Maybe that's a good thing, and they've got a big depth as well. So during these sort of weeks, they can rest and rotate and give a lot of players minutes. The manager knows his style. It's a low possession, counter-attacking system. Teams seem to fall into his trap all the time. If I was playing against them and I was managing against them, I know exactly how I would go about beating Christiansen. It's not rocket science. Let them have the ball and see what they can do with it, because they can't do anything with it. It's just when they counter-attack and have the low possession, they're so dangerous. So I don't know why teams just don't deal with them better than they do. But fair play, you know, they get the results, and it can't be a surprise. It just seems to happen all the time. They constantly overachieve, and it looks like they're going to be absolutely fine again this year, and probably mid-table top half.
Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, in terms of Christiansen, they've so far lost their first 2 games. Molde 2-0 and then Bodø 2-0. Probably understandable. But won all 3 since. They beat Vålerenga away, beat Strømsgodset at home, and beat Salzburg away. So next game is Lillestrøm at home, Odd at home. May well tune into that on the 12th of June. Christiansen, Odd, and I might choose my team to support based on that game. So we shall see. But yeah, that's for another day. But yeah, thanks very much for your question there. And yeah, I mean, there's 1 or 2 more questions, I think, before we wrap up this show. Thank you, Froda. By the way, I can't let this episode go without a mention for ADT. Not seen you for a while, ADT. If you're listening to this, Adrian Thompson, he's tweeted us and said that the issue at Hackney, could it be the prediction of a high placing this year? The commentator's curse, early days yet, which obviously a man who knows my predictions in the past. Great to hear from you, ADT, as always. Thanks for tuning in. Always a friend of the pod. We also had a comment from @Yazik Ruski Yazik, who says, welcome to Russia. Welcome to Kazan. Tweeted us in Russian about Haksabanovic. So thanks for your comment. But Steve, I'm going to wrap it up with 1 question from Ramon Villageliu Arnella, who's a bit of a friend of the pod. I've seen him in the fantasy leagues 1 or 2 times as well. So I think he's got a few fantasy teams in our pod, which is great this season. He asks, do you think that Kjetil Knutsen can train a bigger club in Europe now that a lot of teams are changing their managers? I think that's a good question, actually, Steve. He's done so well at his current club. Could you just give an overview of him and his style? And would he be attractive to clubs abroad? And from your point of view, do you think has there been any interest?
Yeah, I think he could. I think he's the best manager in the Eliteserien, and he has been for a good couple of years, really. I've said it before. I think they're surrounded by a really good coaching team up there. So you know, and it's the same with all managers. People don't realize it. Sometimes you're as good as the team around you, aren't you? And but I'm sure he would, if he was to move somewhere else, he would make sure he's got the pieces in place for what he wants. But he has a direction. He has a clear tactical direction. We talked about Brann earlier. Bodø to the opposite. You know exactly how they're going to play. 4-3-3, high pressing, high tempo, relentless. It's very similar roles. You know, for your players, you'll have, you know, one of the fullbacks will typically be more attack-minded than the other. On the wings, you've probably got one sort of more traditional out-and-out winger. One goes inside. Midfield trio all have similar roles as well. And I'd imagine he could employ that in most leagues around the world. You know, along with his coaching methods, they're always some really physically fit side as well. If that's something you can really implement on anyone, you know, it doesn't matter who and where, really. It's just clear. If you've got a clear fitness sort of direction, then that's something in itself. I think he definitely could go abroad and do very well in doing the same sort of thing. I don't see why not, with better players, as long as you know, these bigger egos sort of had the respect for him, then no problem at all.
And what is it that makes? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about his psychology and things like that. Do you think it's his own? If you took him out of that club and put him in a different environment, can he still do the job, or is it really the sum of all their parts is what makes Bodø so strong?
I say that the sum of all their parts makes him very strong. If you just suddenly randomly put him into Rosenborg now, he's probably not going to do as well. He's going to have to make some more appointments himself, get a right team around him, for sure. I don't know. Maybe he could go to somewhere right now and just immediately make an impact all on him by himself. I don't know. I don't feel it's like a sort of, I don't know, like a Bielsa almost factor where you pop him somewhere and immediately it has an impact. I think you kind of need a few other people around him, or even though with Bielsa, he brings his own team in. So yeah, I think he's at some point he will definitely, obviously, I think, move away to a bigger club. I think he's still got plenty of fish to fry at Bodø Glimt for sure. So I don't think it'll be quite yet, but hey, maybe there's a lot of clubs out there who could do an awful lot worse. I see a lot of good managers floating around, and they don't even get a mention. Look, Christophe Galtier, who's won the title with Lille in Liga, and here there's some like Premier League teams talking about other people. I think, there's Gerald Clemson. At some point, there will be a big deal made of him, but I don't think that time has come yet. He's still very much under the radar.
Great stuff. And I think that's about it for this episode. So we've covered most of what we want to cover. We've answered all your listener questions. That'll be it for Sweden for a good sort of 36 days. But we've definitely got some Norway to come, so we'll be back next week. We will be dissecting Norway, and we'll keep an eye on the transfers and stuff like that. We might have a little mini review of the season so far in Sweden in terms of the transfers and what you can expect, and any latest news, managerial changes, the cup final, things like that. So for now, thanks a lot for joining us. My name is Jonathan Fadugba. You can follow me on Twitter at JFFootball, JFFUTBOL. You can follow Meatman Soccer at Meatman Soccer, and you can follow the podcast on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. We have been doing some bonus episodes on Patreon, so patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. If you want to support us, buy us the equivalent of a cupcake per month or something like that, then we'd be more than happy. Or I don't know, a hamburger for Steve over there, Meatman Soccer. But no, it's been a great episode, Steve. I think it's been informative. Hopefully, everyone's enjoyed it, and I will catch you next week, my friend.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks very much to our new Patreon, Chris. You know who you are. We appreciate your support. But yes, take care, everyone. Goodbye, and we'll see you around again next week.
Massive shout out to Chris, and thanks a lot, Steve. Good to see you again. Take care. Goodbye.